Have you ever thought about a seed? Good seeds are little things that, if planted at the right time, the right place, and are tended to, become huge blessings down the road. Whatever seeds you're sowing today, seeds for your future, for your family, for your faith, or for actual food, you're at the right place. Welcome to the Sowing Seed Podcast. Now, here's your host who raised 3 great kids and occasionally his voice, Matt Miller.
Start with what you got. My oldest daughter, Sarah, was home for Thanksgiving for a week, and we had a chance to spend a bunch of time together. One of the things we had an opportunity to do was on Thanksgiving, do our annual tradition, at least while she's in college, of the two of us going to the Dallas Cowboys game on Thanksgiving Day, because our family celebrates on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving anyway. Well, we got a chance to talk about a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of really, really quality father and daughter time, which we obviously don't get a whole lot of these days since she's a sophomore in college and goes to school away from home. But one of the conversations we were having was what she wanted to do potentially based on what she knows now. Obviously, it's still early here being a sophomore, and what she kind of envisioned herself doing in the future. And she expressed interest in being like a brand manager of some kind with relation to social media and that type of thing. And quite honestly, she does an amazing job with a lot of that stuff. And now going to school as an artist and a graphic designer, she brings that to the table as well. And so I encouraged her to start looking at taking on that role. And there's some opportunities for me, but also for some friends of ours, some family friends, where she could potentially step in and begin to do some of that. The reason why she was hesitant, though, was because she didn't feel like she had what she needed to do it. Meaning, she needed to get a camera, she needed to get a tripod, she needed to get this, she needed to get that, etc., in order to be able to be, in her mind, successful and effective. We had just stopped the car as we were pulling into my wife's sister's place for dinner after the game. And we sat there for a few minutes before going into the house. And I looked at her in the eye and I said, Sarah, you need to start where you are. That stuff will come later. You know, that is such a stumbling block for most of us. Is in our mind, we feel like we have to have all of the stuff to run a business similar to those others that are in that business that we see. Couldn't be further from the truth. Guys, begin where you are now with what you have right now. She has been wildly successful on social media for years now with just her smartphone and her creativity. And I told her, sweetie, you need to start there, start to make some money, and then you can slowly but surely add some of these things over time. You know, many millennials today, and I guess when I was growing up, I felt the same way in a lot of ways, that we want to have the house that our mom and dad had by the time we left it. My parents had been married for 20 years and building a life together for 20 years before I left the house. So for me to think that I could just strut right out into the work world after finishing college and to have anything even remotely close to what mom and dad had after 20 years is ridiculous. Well, the same thing is true in business. Guys, when I got started in my vending company, SSV, I had a 1998 Honda Accord. We lived in a 1,200 square foot rental house, 3 bedrooms. 3 of our kids were sharing one room. Amy and I had another room. And then another room was a pseudo office. I didn't have anything that the world would tell me, or by looking at other people in the vending industry, I should have had to start my business. But I didn't have a choice. All I had was what I had. I had $100 that I could barely cobble together to be able to afford to buy a couple of ebooks and to buy my first used candy and gumball machine, and then to buy the candy and gumballs to go in it. But too many people think they've got to have the cargo van, and they've got to have this, and they've got to have that. That is all a false assumption that you are placing on yourself that's going to keep you where you are for potentially the rest of your life if you don't get over it. So get started where you're at and then grow into it. Find the minimum thing that you have to have in order to get started, and realize that people are not going to judge you 5-10 years from now the way you got started, because they all got started in a very similar way. And who cares what they think anyway? So get started where you're at, whether you have extra money, whether you don't. You know, it cracks me up oftentimes hearing about all these companies out in Silicon Valley and other places that, you know, are getting investors, you know, angel investors and all this stuff, and they're spending, and their burn rates are millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to get this website off the ground. And I'm thinking, where is all that money going? Now, granted, they've got to have some coders and this and that. I get that. But I see so much, and this is just my perception, I may be completely wrong, but I see in so many cases so much money being spent on stuff that is not necessary to start a business. I bootstrapped this thing for a very long time, and many others and most others do as well. So keep that in mind. Figure out the minimum thing you got to have to get the ball rolling, and then jump in with both feet. Don't make excuses for where you're at. Just get busy figuring out the business and doing the meaningful work, and it will come together. I was 3.5 years into SSV when we finally bought our first house when I was at 43 years old. We eventually bought a Honda Odyssey because our family had gotten big enough or too big for the Honda Accord that I had. And that Odyssey ended up being our family van and my servicing vehicle as the business got bigger. But I could have continued, not quite as conveniently, but I could have continued to run the business with the Accord for years and years and years. So don't place those hurdles on yourself. Don't place those expectations, and don't go out and spend a lot of stupid money on stuff that you don't need to get started. Be willing to start with what you have.
Thank you for listening to the Sowing Seed Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review in iTunes or your podcast player of choice. So until next time, go plant the seed you need to succeed.